Hello, welcome. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to InspireXT Connected Intelligence Live. This is our second session. We're very proud of talking about supply chain and manufacturing. Um, we believe that this is an important conversation for our industry, for our peers, for our colleagues, and it's relevant because the whole world is talking about AI and everybody's obsessed with it, and rightly so. But at InspireXT, we are very proud to be taking a leap forward. We are connecting commerce to operations, and it's a tall order. It's a mission that we're very excited about. Uh, we think that the future of supply chain belongs to those who connect these silos and break these barriers down and make products and services accessible to consumers at sustainable, affordable, ethical way. And we are very proud to be able to do our little part in that transformation. Now, we talked about at the beginning of the year the five priorities we've chosen as our guiding principles, at least as we shape our narrative and our execution around supply chain. And I think it's right that we remind ourselves of those because those are still relevant and we going into 2026, which is 6 weeks, 7 weeks away. I think they're still relevant going into next years. Of course, their intensity and meaning are evolving as well. And these are really adopting smart operations, building resilient supply chains, committing to sustainability, innovating for continuing to maintain or finding your differentiation. And last but not the least, perhaps the most important one of all, in the current scenario of AI, is developing and supporting our talent and people. Um, these are the real levers of performance. And we believe that by uniting them through a blueprint um, is the real way to get to the outcome and enable these by our people and do that in a meaningful way. And that's what we are here to talk about today: the blueprint and um, what it looks like, why we need one, what are the challenges, um, what are the fears and myths, and how you can part ways from those myths and get testing and trying those things. And this talk, this conversation, I shall say, is grouped in three segments as we go along. We'll talk about the blueprint itself and fears, and followed by some practical use cases, how we are seeing industry and adopt that. We'll talk about what is blocking us, challenging us, and leaders in adopting that approach. And we conclude with how that continues to shape the future of supply chain. And as we do it, I'm joined by my two brilliant colleagues whom you know and met last time. Um, in the order which they appear in my screen, on my screen, Richard Lewis, our global data and AI lead. Uh, we will seek his insights and insights about the emerging AI world, and of course, Rajeev Kazanji, who is in the sunny side of America, I believe, our global market leader, is a long-term industry, manufacturing industry enthusiast. So we'll explore with him what's happening in the world of supply chain and manufacturing. And we'll have a good conversation. So if you have any questions, please feel free to write those in the chat box. Um, we will get to those as the discussion progresses. So let's get right into it. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks,
Thank
Kuldeep.
you. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So let's start our segment one, which is around the blueprint. And, this is the term that, as supply chain consultant, as people who have done lots of transformation work, we use it um, interchangeably, but I feel that the meaning of it has become clearer, the importance of it has become more clearer as well, because we are in that sort of paradigm right now with AI. So Rajiv, can I start with you to maybe talk a little bit about why do we need blueprint, what it is, and how can any some practical examples around how people are adopting it.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for arranging the second session, Kuldeep. Again, it's a pleasure talking online to you all, and then also sharing some of our learnings and experiences in the market. So, blueprint is important. We see it every day. The fear across transformation and how the executives and the leaderships involved often think that, hey, we got to do this at a large scale. Small doesn't make sense. But I think the fear is confronted head on with something like having a blueprint, a well thought about blueprint, and taking smaller steps. So, a good blueprint or a good situation is where the data, the process, and AI work seamlessly across the value chain of any organization. So, whether you call it about digital core and how AI is embedded in the process, it's not a bolt on essentially. I think we are seeing more and more that we moved away from a bolt on AI kind of, to a seamless inbuilt AI within the processes. And once they talk seamlessly, the data, the process, and the AI, to give a little bit of a predictability in your operations, I think that's a good case to be in, a good situation to be in. And I think organizations are getting there. They're striving to do it. Um, we are in touch with a pharma company. We're working for them where they wanted to do a transformation moving from on-prem to cloud. And that's a big undertaking, as we all know. But then they essentially what they said is, let's make a blueprint of while we are doing that transformation, let's take smaller steps, and also in the parallel do some sort of predictive modeling as well. So while the transformation is happening, they're testing the flavors of moving to cloud. They're also training their models, and we are helping them doing the training and retraining and operationalizing the whole framework for predictive modeling. I think these two go hand in hand. While their transformation is happening, they're looking at AI and how the AI and data and processes come together. We are seeing it across industries, pharma, because of their nature of business and regulation and stuff like that. They're taking very conscious steps towards moving towards some sort of a blueprinting based transformation.
Great, great example. Thank you, Rajiv. And I think we're seeing uptake of that approach because you know organizations have come from these long periods of multi-year transformations that have always been centered around technology, take forever and never finish, and you know things change, and having a blueprint gives that real traceability, real sort of sense of what directions we are headed and what changes and adoptions we are making. So that's great, and I'm glad to hear about pharma industry, which has a lot of responsibility to start taking that path of transformation as well. Richard, you are dealing with data and AI. That's what you do every day. It's a brave new world. On one hand, we can do a lot. On the other, there's a lot of kind of unknown, and we don't know where to start. So tell us, where do we begin? Where do we begin with real confidence and gain that further confidence?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kuldeep. I think Rajeev's example, that pharmaceutical company, sets up the perfect starting point because, when we talk about a blueprint for connected intelligence, most organizations assume that that means starting with algorithms, new models, or a new platform. And in reality, they need to start with something far more fundamental. I think, visibility, alignment, and operational readiness. And so that pharmaceutical client is a great illustration because they built a genuinely strong predictive model, really, really great work from their data science team. And it had real potential to improve product outcomes, to reduce waste, speed up development. But the challenge was that it never really escaped the lab. It stayed as a proof of concept. And that's something that we see across almost every organization that we work with. I think the issue wasn't the model, the science worked. The issue was everything around it. So deployment was manual, retraining was manual. They didn't really have a robust framework for governance and compliance, both of which are obviously critical in a highly regulated industry. And then once the model was used, there was limited visibility into how it performed. So the risk of doing nothing was significant. So slower decisions, unnecessary waste, missed opportunities, and I guess a leadership team that couldn't really fully trust the intelligence that they already had. And I think that's the real starting point for most organizations. It's not about a shortage of ideas or algorithms or models, but it tends to be models that are stuck in experimentation because the ecosystem around them isn't ready. So what did we do? Well, we focused on building the right foundation. So we deployed the model into a secure enterprise-grade cloud infrastructure. We automated the deployment and retraining of that model so that it no longer relied on manual effort from the data science teams. And then we exposed the outputs of that model through secure APIs so that their R&D and manufacturing teams could use that intelligence in real time. And then we added monitoring, governance and auditability to make that model compliant and transparent. And then finally, we wrapped all of it into a managed MLOps service with SLAs that had us as InspireXT responsible for monitoring, the support and the scaling of that model. And the impact came really quickly. The model went live within weeks rather than months. It was instantly auditable and compliant. And all of that really built confidence within their highly regulated environment. And I think importantly, we created a repeatable framework so that all of their future models across R&D, across supply chain, across manufacturing could all be onboarded with much, much less risk. So the biggest outcome ultimately was confidence from the leadership, because now they had intelligence that they could trust, governed by a blueprint that, as Rajeev mentioned, aligns process, data, and compliance. And that's why, I always say that organizations shouldn't start with modeling. They need to begin with visibility, with aligning those processes and the data, with building that operating model that really lets intelligence scale, both safely and repeatedly. And it links directly back to a theme from our last LinkedIn Live session, which is that the digital core is what provides that stability, and then AI provides the adaptability. And I think one without the other always stalls. So when you get that foundation right, intelligence then starts to flow naturally. Teams move from, experimenting with AI to actually benefiting from it. And I think that's what the blueprint for connected intelligence is really about. It's creating those conditions in which innovation can move from the lab into the business and then continue evolving as the organization evolves. So I think that's really where organizations truly begin on this journey.
Very well said. Thank you, Richard. And I think I agree. I think there is not whole lot people do with Blueprint right now. I think we jump straight to project planning and milestones and do this, do that, sort of task orientation. I think while that in itself has value, but that's, I'd say, step number three in this ecosystem. And a blueprint is like that roughly sketched map that has tuned your brain towards going certain direction. You can develop good goals from it. You know that it's not time bound, it's outcome based, and it's goal based. So those are really good examples, gentlemen. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to switch gears and get to the real sort of next relevant topic of this is, all right, we've got a blueprint, but we want to see the future before we can build one, right? The real fear of not failing or not trying because a we are not in control of this new technology. And let's be frank, nobody wants to be not in control. At least that's the world we live in. um, but there are brave people, there are people who want to execute with courage. um, we speak to a lot of industry colleagues, and let's distill some examples as to what are these real fears and what is holding our people back, but what's the reality as well beyond the fear, right? So can we talk about that, and maybe start with you, Rajiv, taking some
Yeah,
transformation examples and build on from there.
sure. And I think this is an interesting topic because nobody acknowledges that they are fearful, right? When you talk to leadership, they'll say, "Yep, we are going doing a large transformation." But I think inherently, I mean, if you lift the covers, and that is what we do, talking to the customers every day, and try to be a trusted advisor to them. And we see a little bit of apprehension in multiple areas. The fear of disruption, for example. Hey, why do we change something which is working well? But they got to be in sync with the timing and the technology, and the faster decision making. Market is changing, and all sorts of things have to be done. But there is a fear of disruption, for example. And there is a concern about talent. A lot of these companies, the technology is changing so fast. I think people started doing something and hiring people, and then suddenly you realize 6 months down the line, there's new technology in the in the front, and then we got to address that. And that's talent is something which is wearing them off in terms of thinking transformation. Data quality, another area which is an obvious one. There is a fear, and I'm in midst of. I just came from a conversation where you know data migration, data quality. I think they are looking at, will this expose us, because the foundation if itself is not really great in terms of when you start using AI. You got to have data in place. So when you start looking at it, lifting covers, and then they realize that the data is not in the right quality, I think they got to fix that. And I think the last but not the least is the ROI economics around transformation. Doesn't come easy. It is a lot of effort, a lot of dollars or money involved. And is there a fair amount of ROI? I think these are some of the fears that the C level has to every time they make a decision. Look at all the pros and cons and juggle the balls and figure out what's the best way to go forward. But I think a blueprinting kind of removes some of these fears, in my opinion. I think they have to do a little bit of a walk before you crawl before you walk, and the analogy there. But I think that blueprinting helps that to a certain extent, in my opinion. And I've seen people really successful in doing that.
Yeah, that's well said. I as my role as a founder of a 7 years old company, of course, the challenges may not be as big as the challenges that half a billion or billion-dollar companies face, but I think the fear, or the at least the concerns around decision making and what goes behind the scenes, and those are understandable. But I've realized that you can only fear um, for a while before fear gets you, and then
You got to
something
make
else
this.
happens, and then the thing is that um, if you do not do that sort of small experimentation, controlled fashion, let's experiment, let's try things out, enable people, sort of give them that real purpose of growth and progress. uh, I think we're not doing justice to our organizations in that sense, and we have a lot of technology and a lot of pressure to modernize, but you can't get there without experimentation and without working and fighting this fear. So, Richard, tell us, yours is an area where that is perhaps more prevalent as the cost economics, the data quality, and AI is proving to be a messiah or the solution for every problem in the world. Yet we still have problems around us. So when are we going to solve all of them, Richard?
Absolutely. I think, talking about fears, to be candid, the biggest fear that I typically encounter when it comes to data and AI is one word, and that's complexity. So it's not the fear of AI replacing people, it's not the fear of automation, but it's the fear that the organization is simply just too complex to move forward. And I think many enterprises that we work with are carrying decades of technical debt. They've got legacy data warehouses that, were state of the art 20 years ago, perhaps. They've got ETL pipelines that have been patched and then repatched by different teams over the years. They've got BI tools that are layered on top of BI tools, each introduced to solve a specific problem at a specific moment in time. And yes, those systems do still work technically, but they no longer really support the speed and the intelligence that the business now demands. And I think this creates a very real fear for leaders. They look at the landscape, thousands of data assets, overlapping reports, multiple clouds, multiple vendors, and they think, if we touch this, everything's going to break, or it will take years to modernize, or even, I'm not sure where half of this came from anymore. I think one of our manufacturing clients had been relying on the same data warehouse for almost 20 years, and it had served them well, but the business had outgrown it. So they now needed real-time signals, predictive insights, integrated intelligence, and the architecture underneath just simply wasn't built for that. And the consequences were obvious, I think. Analysts spending time fixing data instead of interpreting it, teams relying on reports that weren't, they weren't confident in, and innovation really being slowed down, not by ambition, but ultimately by the infrastructure underneath. And so what we're helping them to explore now is a move to a modern data platform with Databricks, using a lakehouse architecture. And what matters here is it's not just a new home for their data warehousing workloads. It's a foundation that then supports everything that the business wants to do next. So advanced data science, predictive analytics, and even emerging AI agent use cases as well. And so from that perspective, it's not just about modernization, it's really about future proofing for the business. And I think the most important shift isn't the technology, it's the mindset. Once leaders realize that transformation can be incremental, as Rajeev said, you don't need a big bang overhaul. The fear sort of slowly begins to ease. People see that intelligence doesn't require ripping out everything that works already. It's more about connecting what works with what needs to evolve. And I think that's the moment really where fear can turn into confidence, because the realization is this: complexity isn't a permanent barrier, it's simply a signal. It's a signal that the organization has outgrown the foundations that it started with. And when you respond to that signal with a blueprint-led approach, you give people clarity. You give the business stability, and you give AI the environment that it really needs to be successful. So I think for me, complexity is the quiet fear behind most data and AI conversations. But with the right blueprint, the right operating model, and the right modern data platform, I think that complexity then becomes manageable, and intelligence really starts to become scalable.
Very well. That's very powerful. Thank you for bringing that dimension out. Here's the truth, though, right? I mean, the fear never goes away because there's no real remedy to fear other than fighting the fear, right? And the longer you put that whole idea of that, you know, what if this, what if that, the whole sort of hy- hypothesis or paradoxical arrangement, just robbing the organization of what it can become or our own lives, what it could become. So, um, of course, acknowledging the fear is the starting point. That knowing that it's no more than just an emotion that we need to work on and maybe join hands with some like-minded people or people who are not so much like-minded with us and creating that counterbalance to experiment. And um, it's the same in our lives as it is in the organizational life. And if people leading the organization are fearful, the organization is fearful. It's not other way around. And that's essentially what leaders' responsibility today is, to lead with that confidence that I'm going to try something new. I've got my organization's back behind, or my back is looked after well. And you know, it's it's that sort of an amplified driven approach, the whole autonomy, mastery, purpose driven approach that I think can unleash that innovation, that commitment, that development for talent, that organizations will win and succeed. So let's fight our fears together. Let's build that narrative and create examples and cases that people can learn from, and then you know it becomes almost like a reference model for others to follow. With that, let's talk about we are on this topic of fear. So I think the next um, step brother of fear is called myth. So
Yeah.
you fear is one, and then hearsay and believing that hearsay and it becoming the reality is another thing. So a lot of the time we are not doing something because we've heard that XYZ company could not succeed, or XYZ person could not get this right, and um, we start to believe that those myths essentially. So as we talk about building the future of supply chain and manufacturing and the whole ecosystem of the value chain, let's look ahead and say what myths leaders need to leave behind as they build this innovative world of supply chain and manufacturing. And this time around, I'm going to switch the order. So, Richard, why don't we start with you? And you hear quite a lot about it. So, let's do one myth per person and go from there.
Perfect. Yeah, I guess let's take one of the biggest myths head on. So this idea that AI will somehow fix broken data. The reality is that it won't. If anything, AI amplifies whatever foundation that it finds. So when the data underneath is inconsistent or fragmented, AI doesn't create clarity. It ultimately ends up with creating chaos at speed.
Yeah.
I think this is a myth that leaders really need to leave behind as they shape the supply chain of the future, because the future supply chain isn't going to be built on clever algorithms or models. It's going to be built on strong foundations. And for us, and we've talked about this a number of times now, that foundation is the digital core, really brought together through a blueprint that aligns people, process, data, and intelligence. And what we often see is businesses trying to plug forecasting models or AI agents into a landscape where processes just aren't standardized, where data governance is patchy, and even basic ownership isn't very clear. And I think the result is predictable. Models drift, planners don't trust the outputs from those models. Insights get ignored, and then AI really ends up becoming something that the business just experiments with, rather than something that the business is able to run on. And I think that the truth is simple. You can't engineer the supply chain of the future by just layering intelligence on top of a fragmented core. You've got to build it by strengthening that core first. And I think when the digital core gives you clean, connected, consistent data, and when the blueprint gives you aligned processes and a shared operational truth, AI doesn't need to fix anything. It just amplifies what's already working. It turns visibility into foresight and connects demand signals directly to operational decisions. And it does that reliably because the foundation underneath is stable. So I think if there's one myth to let go of, it's this belief that AI is the starting point. AI is the multiplier. Digital core is the foundation. And when you bring those two together through a blueprint for connected intelligence, I think the supply chain of the future then becomes more than automated. It becomes adaptive, it's resilient, and it's continuously improving. I think ultimately that's why this myth really matters. AI won't fix broken data, but a strong digital core guided by that connected blueprint can help to prevent it from breaking in the first place.
Very good. Clean, consistent, and connected. I'm
Yes.
taking that away. Those three words, I think they're nicely articulated. And I think we heard the data story earlier as well. Um, okay, Rajiv, one myth
So,
from your side that leaders need to leave behind.
so before that, should we patent this? Clean, consistent, and what did you say? Connected.
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 Three C's. That's awesome. That kind of resonates well. No, I think a myth that we need to really move forward and drop is that transformation is all about disruption. It's not. It's a fear that can be really addressed with taking some steps. So that's one thing I would say. And small. It doesn't mean to have a big bang and a large scale transformation to achieve success. You could do smaller initiatives and things like that, and bring home the point that transformation is messy. It's not easy, but also the thought process that it is not just a system upgrade. It is more of in terms of what do you call it? It's a shift in thinking. It's a as you use quite often the operating system of a company. It's basically thinking in terms of the operating system of the organization. So I think that's very important. And use of AI, and Richard, you kind of nailed it in terms of AI will only amplify, the underlying foundation. So focus on data quality and things like that. And supply chains of the future will be designed taking those into consideration. And the use of AI is obviously the need of the hour. But then customer centricity around the use of AI is important as well. So that will drive the future of supply chain, I would say.
Great. Well, I have a myth three that I can talk about, and I think Richard and I recently have been talking to some customers and partners, and I think this is the idea that volume or scale is the indicator of success. That the more we can do in data and AI, the better it is. Of course, more is always better in some sense, but not always. And especially when you're experimenting and you're learning and you're going on a journey. So, um, taking maybe one use case and trying it out and letting people learn through it. It's a great idea, great enabler of a scale. So that's another myth that is holding people back because
Right.
um, more requires more data, and data is not clean, it's not consistent. Of course, it's not connected, as Richard also talked about, and that already becomes like you're putting brakes before you hit the pedal accelerator. So that's myth three. Um, Gentlemen, that is the segment three that we just completed. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and wisdoms and learning. Um, I I believe that this is an important topic. We touched on the blueprint, we touched on transformation, the fears, the opportunities, the myths, um, and essentially, I wonder, as somebody who is in the ecosystem, has done supply chain, done consulting, that how can we help? We our role is to help. Our role is to solve problems and try to remove the noise, simplify solutions from this chaos and the complexity. And um, that's the more I think about all of these things, and the more I talk to colleagues, yourselves, and others, and partners, the more I believe in our mission. The more I think that one day we will have connected commerce to operations. It's not a mission that we can achieve overnight. It means different things to different customers and different ecosystem stakeholders. But for us, that is really a great opportunity to bring out all the creativity, all the innovations that we've learned and built over the last several years and decades. And that's why this whole connected solution motion is done. And I wonder if we touch a little bit about what we are doing in that area, Richard, especially around the connected process model, the whole digital core ethos that you talked about, and the natural AI, and how could those be used as part of this experimentation motion? And we don't claim to have all the answers, but if you don't try, the answers won't come to us automatically. So we have to kind of use that opportunity. So could you share with our audience and just examine a little bit more about what those are and how we are being part of this solution?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is exactly where our connected process model and natural AI come into the picture, because I think once you've created the conditions for intelligence to operate, the next question really becomes, where do we focus and how do we scale this without ultimately losing control? And I think our connected process model is the starting point for that. It gives leaders a clear end-to-end view of how their business actually works, not the idealized process map, but the operational reality. So it shows where decisions are made, where data is created, and then where handoffs often slow things down, and ultimately where intelligence can then genuinely move the needle. So it turns that blueprint from a concept into something that is concrete and actionable. And I think once that clarity exists, natural AI then takes over as the engine room for innovation. So if the connected process model gives you the map, then natural AI is the workbench. So it lets teams design, test, and deploy, as well as maintain AI in a controlled and scalable way, always grounded in, I guess, the real processes and the data flows that we've mapped across the business. And it means that you're not building isolated POCs. Ultimately, you're building connected capabilities that fit naturally into the way that the organization operates. And I think crucially, both of those tools for us, connected process model and natural AI, enforce governance and repeatability, which is what a lot of organizations that we speak to are missing. Leaders can see exactly where AI is going to add value in their processes. Teams can develop models with confidence. Compliance and audit trails are built in, and the business ultimately gains a repeatable pattern. Identify, design, deploy, learn, and improve. So when we talk about a blueprint for connected intelligence, this is really what it means. the connected process model gives you that clarity, the where and the why, and then natural AI gives you the capability, almost, the how and the how fast. And when you put them together and create a living system where intelligence isn't just an experiment anymore, it really can become part of how you run the business every day.
Great. Thank you for bringing that all together. Let's wrap up. I think we've come to a natural conclusion of this, what I call InspireXT Connected Intelligence Live. Um, I'm not sure whether you can hear any background noise. I've got some guests today, so um, this is this is an extra contribution from my side to the.
They sound like they're having fun.
Yeah, they're certainly having fun. So, but let me conclude. This is distracting me quite a lot right now. Um, but I enjoyed our conversation. I think this is the topic of the hour. But it's really about how do we bring trust into all this? How do we enable our people to lead with that trust and clarity and confidence, and reminding back those 5 priorities that we set ourselves at the beginning of the year. I feel um, those are still relevant. They will be shaped slightly differently as we move into 2026. Um, and we'll talk more about them, and we'll share some more practical and pragmatic examples. But thank you, Rajeev. Thank you, Richard. And thank you, those who joined us this live. And this is Connected Intelligence Live, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Kuldeep and Richard.